Connie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. I hope you're well. My name is Jerome, and I am a Sane Environmentalist. It's a beautiful day in Wickenburg, Arizona, where I'm at now. The sun is in the sky. The sky is mostly blue. Temperature is about 63, 62. Not a breeze about. So, I guess today I want to talk about Happy New Year. This is the beginning of a new cycle for everybody. And as well, this is the time of the year that we often look back upon ourselves and upon our humanity and investigate that more. You know, and I think that we each play a part in this big chain of life that we're involved in, and that the impact that we have is real, just by our very existence. Because of our very existence, the impact that we have on the environment is real. Every single person has certain needs. Sorry, I was walking around. Needs for food, need for warmth, need for clothing, and need for water, just to name a few. And by taking those things that are not natural to the earth, something we have to manufacture, we use energy. And heat is a primary example. Imagine if every human on the planet heated with wood. There would be no trees very quickly. I mean, we need more carbon because of our manufacturing process than our life form has credits for. So we have to come up with carbon somewhere else. And that's why we dig it out of the ground. You know, and that has implications. If, you know, I am right now talking on electrons that were generated in a nuclear fission. So, in a way, just by virtue of our humanity and the fact that we exist, we must do some damage. So the trick is to figure out a way to help mitigate that damage. And also, another thing, this is the time of year when people of a giving nature try to help people out, generally speaking. And here, this is the perfect time of the year to make a pledge to ucy.tv. Go right to the site, and click on the donate button. You can do as little as you want or as much as you want. But we need your help. We need your support, you know. And I'm beginning to realize as well that as our population increases, we kind of self-sustain because we have just by the nature of our technology, we're doing so much destruction that we're going to kill ourselves back, as it were, you know. So that is what it is, you know, as my niece would say. You know, that is exactly what it is. So, and another in the nature of humanity thing is this. Help somebody out. Do something nice for somebody. Make a decision based on moral decency. You know, make it a point to do that. You know, to help another soul out. You know, because we all got to do what we can do. Even with slender means, the sentiments of the heart can be expressed. So, I want to talk about homelessness for a second. I find that homelessness is way understood in our country. Most people, when you say homeless, they think of a raggedy, dirty person with like a shopping cart, and a few belongings. That's the image. Oh, the homeless. You know, that's the image that comes to your head. But it's not the reality. You know, the reality is that homelessness is something that not only affects people with shopping carts, but also people like me. You know, I'm homeless. I do not have a place that I can say, this is my house. You know, I can say I'm staying with somebody else or somewhere else, but right now, I do not have a home. You know, and I've even had some discussions with people, and they're like, "Well, you're not homeless; you're houseless." And you know, home is where the heart is. All that. Nah, it's still you're still homeless unless your name is on the lease. That's how I feel. You know, so or there's an agreement of some sort. Usually, wherein you pay money and you have a right to a property. So remember that there's a lot of people out there that are staying with relatives and that are still working, still doing their thing, still staying clean. And they are a real population of people, and a large one, a large underreported one, and a result of our modern economy. You know, there's not many people that can say, in the event of a tragic illness or disease or injury, I could sustain myself for 4 months or 6 months until I got better. You know, not many people could do that. So some retirees that could do that. You know, but majority of Americans and people in the world generally could not do that. They would be homeless. You know, after a while, it's like you can't pay the rent, no more credit. That's it. You're done. You know, and then when you're homeless, how do you keep your job, et cetera, et cetera? Our society is set up that way. It's set up to punish the poor. The poorest among us who do the hardest jobs that there are punished for it. So, if you know anybody who's homeless, try to understand that there are many more where they came from. and we should try to help people out like that, basically. Alrighty, so I did a little study, actually followed up on a study that Lonnie Clark, my co-host, had started, and the study was basically a look at cancer rates and the locations of nuclear power plants. So I pulled up a bunch of maps and stuff and had a look, and especially with cancer hotspots, there is a strong concurrence with nuclear facilities. However, there's also a strong concurrence in those same zones of every other type of facility. A lot of it in the southeast United States, huge amount. And the whole upper northeast peninsula is a gigantic cancer hotspot. As well around Los Angeles. And it's slightly elevated in the front range of the Rockies. But those are the hotspots. Central California, Central Coastal California, the Southeast, and the Northeast United States. And I got to thinking, well, I don't think it's all just nuclear, though. You know, I think that it's nuclear and it's chemical. I think it's dietary. I just think that there's a lot of different variables that could occur that would cause that situation. Like, there's 100 different variables that create and cause cancerous conditions. You know, and some among those variables are just humanity itself. Our thinking can give us cancer, you know. And so, you know, the human DNA, it's tricky, but there's also much industry all around there. And all those industries and different kinds of industries, everything from your little shop down the street, spray painting cars, to all the little shops and stuff. Everyone produces fumes. Everyone produces environmental pollution, you know. And if you live in a city or in a more congested area, you get a higher percentage of that general pollution, and that includes nuclear. You know, they didn't mess around down there. There's like 30 nuclear plants in the southeast United States. 2-3 reactor units. So many of them. And all of them, one second away. Because they're running them as hot as they possibly can. You know, get the most bang for your buck before it goes down. But, yeah, so the industrialization, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about, the power of our humanity. The industrialization process has produced chemical byproducts, which in turn are causing us to get cancer. So, as we are the top of the food chain and we have no predators, cancer seems like a likely thing that the universe would do to help equalize things. You know, cancer would be a way for those in a denser population of individuals, and I don't mean humans even, other creatures. You know, though, if it hurts your brain to think about humans dying and that being just a natural thing, then think of it as mice or whatever. You know, but if you have too many individuals in any population, then your cancer rates are going to increase, just because that's the only way that nature can help control the population, because nature knows it's not right. You know, and we're able to foil nature at every turn with our heat and our cooling and our roofs and our clothing. and our cars. How many of you drive a car? How many of you drive a car but live in a city where you really could put a bike on the front of a bus and get everywhere you need to go? Great. It might take more time, but there you go. How many of us are, guilty of producing part of this toxic cloud that's gonna cause many of us to get cancer? And again, I don't think there's any blame to that. I think it's just the nature of genetics and DNA and population control amongst the top rung species. Us having the peculiarity of being a species that is completely independent of the environment. We control the environment to us instead of adapting to the environment. We create little boxes and put ourselves inside of them and control the environment in the boxes. So that is our peculiarity in the whole thing. But so yeah, that is looking at my show notes here. I'm literally wandering around in the backyard because I don't really have a spot to do this, unfortunately. Yeah. So and part of our waste stream, a big part of our waste stream, is high-level nuclear waste from power plants, i.e. spent fuel bundles or unstable fuel bundles. They're not really spent. The processing materials and waste from that go into making those bundles, just generally all of the crap, gloves, suits, boots, tools, equipment that's used to process and manufacture that fuel. So there's a huge, giant mountain of this high-level radioactive waste, a literal mountain of it. Okay. And what are we going to do with it? And I was doing some research, and I went to the EPA's website, and they're like, in their nuclear category under high-level nuclear waste, Yucca Mountain. They're like, Yucca Mountain, let's put it in Yucca Mountain. That's just perfectly safe. And it's like, well, but it isn't. It isn't safe. Yucca Mountain is not safe. We need to stand up against Yucca Mountain. It is a fault-ridden area full of faults, near the caldera of a supervolcano. If you're thinking of million-year solutions, that's not one of them. And it's so bad down there that they're like, well, we appear to have a little bit of a dripping problem from above, so we're going to build shields over the, like a stainless steel shield over these casks of high-level nuclear waste, and the water will drip off the sides, it won't drip on to the cask, and so the cask will be safe. And I'm thinking, how long is your stainless steel shield going to last? That whole area is going to fill with water eventually. If it's dripping from the roof, it will continue to drip perpetually until the thing's full of water. That's just the nature of the earth. And when it becomes full of water, then it degrades, then it becomes loose. And then it gets into the groundwater, which flows back out, down, continues on down, and literally probably into the water supply of New Mexico. God, people, haven't we done enough damage to New Mexico? Those poor people. So yeah, there really is no economically viable, safe, permanent repository method available, technologically speaking, right now. Now, if we wanted to spend the money, to find literally the most geologically stable area in the world that's in granite, or in the United States it's in granite, and use that. But still, then we got to pick this stuff up and we got to move it. We got to move it from the southeast United States to New Mexico. Well, how are you going to do that? And they're like, well, we're going to use trains and trucks. And how many trips is that going to take? And they said, well, thousands. Tens of thousands of trips, one car at a time. And it's like, and they're going to be on our train tracks, think Amtrak, Washington, and they're going to be on our highways. Thousands of them over a period of many years. That basically is just asking for a catastrophe right there. And thousands of trips, you will have at least one or two major accidents where you lose containment of an entire truck full of spent fuel. Just lose containment. Boom. We would clean it up, but nobody can get close enough to even look at it. So we've kind of cordoned off a 2-mile zone, and nothing to see here. Move along, folks. And is that what we want? So I hope I'm not breaking up. I keep getting this poor network connection thing. Skype is kind of a pain in the ass. Okay, like I'm literally touching my phone to the router, and it says I've got a poor network connection. Oh, that fixed it. Jerk Skype. So we got 922. Moving right along. Let's talk about this guy. His name is, I will put a link in the YouTube version of this presentation to his YouTube page. But this is a guy that goes around in Japan measuring radiation. He's got some kind of camera set up where you puts the Geiger counter on a pole in front of the camera and then just walks around. Doesn't say a word, just walks around, and you can just see the Geiger counter going off. And at 3 feet, in, I would say, half of the places he goes, the background radiation level is very much normal. It's like 1.2, 2.3 microsieverts per hour, which is not great, but not terrible. But then he goes down to ground level to 1 foot and 6 inches, and all of a sudden it jumps up to 15, 18, 20, 50, 70, and spots over 100. Anywhere he goes, at least 50% of the time. So it's so what that tells me right there is that is basically all the cesium that came out of the plant and is now in the soil from Fukushima is down there where kids are. And he goes to playgrounds and stuff and gets these same measurements with kids playing there. But because at 3 feet, background levels aren't bad, well, then we don't have to worry about it. And that is Japan's folly right there, because what they're doing is they're literally cursing their children to have genetic flaws in the future. With their deliberate denial is the only word I'm going to use, and perpetuation of lies on the people. The whole, oh, there's nothing to see here, move along mentality is prevalent in Japanese society. The nuclear taboo there is even stronger than it is anywhere else in the world. You know, they are once proud and fiercely independent, proud nation that got obliterated by nuclear fire and then rebuilt with the help of the people who created the nuclear fire, and then prospered to the point of complete success. I mean, economically, Japan is a powerhouse. You know, when you think of what they've done in the last 60 or 70 years to recover from World War II, it's amazing. You know, and they're killing their kids. They're not killing their kids, they're killing their kids' genetics. And that's something that might take a generation or two before all of a sudden every third baby is born with a brain tumor or a mutation, or that there's just 100 different things, you know, that are more subtle. All of a sudden everybody's dying at 50 of heart disease, you know, or vision amongst the population drops to 50% of what it was, or hearing, or any of the other intricacies that give us a body and make us successful. You know, genetic damage doesn't have to mean a tumor. Genetic damage might be in the next generation. The kid's eyes just won't be so good. You know, some of the higher brain functions might not work quite as well. You know, it doesn't mean you're going to have a second head going. You know, it's not like it adds to it, takes it away from it. Consider damage from radioactivity like holding a DNA strand up and then shooting it with a shotgun, where you're not completely destroying it, but you're knocking out bits and pieces here and there. And so, you know, if you think about it, what would happen to your typical computer system if you just went in and took out 0.01% of all of the bits and just erased them? It would have unknown, unforeseen effects, but it would ultimately kill the system. So that's basically that's the way that is. The children of Japan are going to be carrying forward a terrible, terrible price to their great-grandchildren, if humanity is even around for that much longer. Contrails. Okay. So, as I said a little earlier, I'm in Arizona, and the sky here is big. It is a huge sky. I'm on top of basically right in the middle of a old caldera in Wickenburg, Arizona. And all around me, there's mountains all the way around, and I'm right in the middle. And it creates kind of a high-pressure dome. This caldera effect somehow creates sort of a high-pressure dome, and so you don't get a lot of clouds from horizon to horizon most times. However, I've been noticing in the last 2 or 3 months that contrails on planes just don't seem to act the same here as they do where I remember them, you know. And my memories of contrails are as a kid. You know, I used to lie on the grass and look up in the sky, And there you'd see a plane, and then have like sometimes a longer one, like 4 inches, if you know what I mean. 4 inches if you're looking at it, hold your hand up and look. But not all the way across the sky, and then they'd always go away really quick, and that was one thing that I really enjoyed, watching them go away. And I've been watching these contrails, and the plane leaves a contrail, and it looks pretty like normal, but then wait a minute, it's not going away, and it just sits there. And I'm like, that's kind of weird, and it sits there, and it sits there, and as it sits there, it spreads out. And as it spreads out, it becomes this hazy bar in the sky. And then these hazy bars kind of connect with each other and form like an overall low-level haze everywhere. Like you can't really even call them clouds. They're like wispy, hazy bars that block the sun for sure. But in the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've gotten really, really extreme about it. Like I did 2 YouTube videos yesterday, and I'm doing a series today as well, just documenting it. About these chemtrails that they're leaving, and they're real. I got to tell you, I even have asked other people who are not at all related or connected or even thinking about that. And they're like, yeah, a contrail just goes away after a minute. And I'm like, but look at that. Is that a contrail? They're like, no, that's a cloud. And I said, look at it again. And they're like, huh. Well, that's strange. It's like, okay, see, I'm not crazy. So, at first, when I heard about this program, this aerial spraying program, I thought that I can't think of a reason that they would do that whoever they are would do that. Couldn't think of a reason. It's like, well, why would somebody do that? Nobody, I mean, that's a lot of money, isn't it? I mean, buying equipment, buying whatever aerosols they're using, dispersing them, paying people to do it. It's not cheap. Why would they do that? And I'm still really unsure. I really am. But I do know this. If indeed these cloud bars are composed of aluminum, iron, and I think there's probably aluminum, iron, boron in there, and a few other things that we don't know what they are. But all that, and aluminum for sure. So all of that rains out. It all falls out of the sky. And I mean, that's what the whole dispersion process is it's basically gravity taking over and pulling the particles towards the ground, where they interact with the wind. But they do hit the ground. They are heavy. They do have mass. So they do hit the ground. And it seems like aluminum is really bad for things. Aluminum is just horrendous. It's I know that it causes Alzheimer's disease and probably childhood brain dysfunction diseases as well. And it kills plants for sure. So if you sprinkled aluminum over a big enough area, you could literally kill that area. So I don't know. Maybe that's what that's about. I don't know. I'm very confused, but I do know that aluminum has very negative impacts on our world. Very negative. And let's see, aluminum is on the rise. They're tested children, and it's on the rise in children. It's on the rise in people. So aluminum is becoming part of our environment, and when it does enough, then there again, there's another cancer blast. There's another genetic damage blast. The heavy metals. So that's really sad. So recently, University of Chicago had a celebration. I think it was a 60th year or 50th year, I'm not sure, since they discovered nuclear fission in that laboratory, apparently, in Chicago. That's where they discovered nuclear fission, and they are so proud of themselves for that. They had a whole big celebration, and all of the pro-nukers showed up and were, yes, nuclear is good. It's good. It's clean and safe and green. And it's like, and then Arnie Gunderson, they invited Arnie Gunderson, and he got up there. And he did the most accurate representational verbography of the carbon cycle on our planet and the balance of it of anybody that I've ever heard. And the way he did that was he compared our climate system and our planet and the ecosystem on our planet to an apple. Okay, the apple is the planet. Okay, the skin on the outside of the apple represents the ecosystem. Okay, so if you look at the Earth, that is true. It's a thin skin of life on top of its big rock. And he said, and the way the carbon cycle works is that as long as the carbon that's above the skin is that all the carbon that's being consumed, then the other things in the ecosystem will be able to absorb the carbon and it'll maintain a balance. It's only when you dig under the skin and pull out old carbon, carbon that has been sequestered from previous mass extinctions, then and other things from under the skin, then you're going to not only throw this cycle, but that cycle and the other cycle out of balance. You could slowly reintroduce more carbon, okay, and the whole system will grow and use it. But if you introduce it too quickly, that's where you're going to have issues. And the skin of the apple is very thin, folks. Really think about life like that. Think about the Earth as an apple or an egg, and the usable part is the shell or the skin. Everything else is just rock and dead other organisms and their carbon. So that is, I thought that was a great analogy. I thought that was a great example of really what is our carbon cycle and why is it out of balance. And if you think about it, you dig under the skin of the apple, you pull out that old carbon and pump it into the atmosphere. Well, your ecosystem isn't going to be able to absorb it because it hasn't evolved yet and built up enough to absorb it. And so then you're going to end up with additional carbon in the cycle, most of which probably will be mixed with oxygen to form CO2. And that CO2 will create the blanket effect that we are experiencing right now. So as long as you are pulling carbon from under the skin and putting it out, you are throwing the system farther and farther and farther and farther out of balance. Now, my question to you listeners is this. Do you see us ever, as a species, even slowing down our extraction of carbon from within the surface of the Earth? Do you see us even slowing down that? I don't. I see us using it more and more and more and more until it's all gone. And then we'll suck at it like a kid with a soda pop with just a little bit of soda and a bunch of ice in it. Don't be fooled. So this is going to continue, is the point. We will continue to extract all the carbon that was in the ecosystem. See, that's the thing. All that carbon used to be in the ecosystem. So let's think about that just for a minute. How much different the Earth is now than it was 65 million years ago. And then when you had, where I'm standing right now would have been a giant inland sea. I would be underwater. Or perhaps inside the caldera of a giant erupting volcano. I can see it. I can see it as I look around. I am in a caldera. Like, I could see this whole thing just being full of magma. Some of it solidified here and there, but mostly just magma. And lots of critters all around. And then it would have been like Pacific Coast weather, only warmer, probably better than Florida. This Arizona with the hot sun. So that's way different than it is today. And what we're doing is we're throwing the whole cycle backwards. The more carbon we throw out, and that cannot end well. That cannot end well. You can't hope for a better outcome. There's only certain things that you can really count on, and that is the selfishness of humanity, our not only inability, but no desire to do the things that would preserve us as a species. The whole, I've got what I want, I'm satisfied, and well, that's good enough for me. Whatever happens to some kid down the road or person down the road doesn't affect me because I'll be dead. That is the prevailing sentiment in the world. There hasn't been a lot of thought to, well, what we're doing will utterly destroy this ecosystem that we're sharing. And, think Blade Runner. Once we finally do get all of that into the air, it'll be thick. The air will be like a soup. It'll rain a lot. Some areas will freeze, other areas will bake. Sea levels will rise. That is the result of imbalancing the system by sucking out old carbon from under the skin of the apple and bringing it to the surface. You just can't do that. You have to use the carbon that you have on top of the skin. And as long as you use that, you're good to go. But you see, because we're humans, we're different. Every other species just uses the carbon that's on the top of the skin. They eat it, and they consume it, and they crap it out, and it goes back into the ground, where the plants absorb it and reuse it, and it's a perfect system. Unless you introduce humanity. If you introduce humanity to the system, all of a sudden it's not. really so perfect anymore. All of a sudden, it's temperature is increasing. Who would think that one species could actually create a planetary change in conditions? Who would think it? It is counter to the whole plan of the Earth. It really is. It's counter to the whole plan of the Earth. So we are an abnormality. We are an aberration, humanity. With all of our intelligence and our wisdom and our love for life, our language and the things of beauty we perceive and create, music, etc., we are a disease on this planet. And just by nature, just by virtue of our nature, we have to destroy it. What could you do otherwise? You can't. You have to have a society. You can't. You have to have technology. You have to have heating. You have to have cooling. There's just certain things that we need, and we'll never stop pulling stuff up from under the ground. That's not going to happen. The more stuff we find, the more we'll pull up. And when we do, it's just going to be a big, giant mess. So that is the sad reality of our existence, humanity, is that we are cancer. We really are. I hate to say it, but it's true. We're an abnormal growth in an organism. You consider the Earth and its ecosystems an organism. And if you consider us a tumorous abnormal growth whose waste products create sickness for the rest of the system, then that is one way you could look at it. And then if I wax philosophical on it all, then I go, well, then why? Okay. Then how could this occur in any natural system that doesn't have the programming for it? The Earth doesn't have the programming for humans. As far as it's gotten, I would say dolphins and a few other creatures are pretty darn smart, but they're not create technology smart. They're not build a factory smart. So we are abnormal. But why? What's the point? Is there a point? There might not be a point to it. It might just be, if you go back to the within itself, creating a... No, it doesn't even make sense either. I don't understand. I have a theory or two. One of them involves some sort of extraterrestrial activity that occurred that would cause our DNA to alter. Either we had the potential for our intelligence and were just given technology which stimulated it, or our DNA was altered in a sophisticated way which had allowed an almost instantaneous frontal lobe to happen in our line, in our genetic line. We went from Lucy to us like that. Went from a small brain, very intelligent monkey to tool-using creatures. And, well, let's put it this way: if you look at the world clock as one day, 24 hours, that probably happened in about 20 minutes. That if in the whole cycle. That's how quickly it occurred. It was abnormal. They call it the evolutionary gap. Look it up, and some people may have tried to dissuade it, but it is true that there is an evolutionary gap that occurred in humanity, and only in humanity. Oh, sorry. What makes us so special, huh? So there is an evolutionary gap, and we are special, humanity, and we're beautiful. And the thing is, we do have the power. Each and every single one of us has the power to create the changes that would slow down, at least, the rate of destruction that we're doing to the ecosystem by nature of our existence. We have the power. If every person that hears this show says, you know what, I'm going to just put one solar panel on my roof, and that was 1,000 people. Okay, you're talking, that's now a megawatt of off-grid energy that's being used by 1,000 people. Okay. If everybody did 3 solar panels on their roof, that would be 3 megawatts, and your typical house here in Arizona, on average, uses about 1 megawatt a month of electricity. So, if you could generate 1 megawatt of electricity in this bright Arizona sun, boom. And I was looking at systems, they're cheap. It's amazing. You get a 30% rebate from the government, and then there's other write-offs and rebates you can get. So you can end up paying a very low cost. Like for a decent 3 kilowatt system with solar, with power walls for battery backup, probably, and then that backed up by a biodiesel generator, you're probably looking at $16,000 after all the dead credits and stuff. But that would immediately put you off the grid. You would no longer need to be tied to the electric grid with the power that you produce plus the storage that you create. And you can do your own hot water. Here you could do that with a very small panel in the summer. Very small panel. Probably a 2x2 panel would be enough to create enough hot water, almost boiling hot water here in Arizona. So, a 4x3 size panel in the wintertime would work, I'm sure. And, boom, all of a sudden, there you go. You're not burning as much natural gas. You're not using electrons that are created in the process of fissioning or combustion of things that you pulled out from under the apple skin. Okay? And just one house, that's 1 megawatt a month of worth of carbon that's not going back into the air. If you multiply that by every other house, all of a sudden, we've got ourselves an alternative. What did I hear? I read that the entire electrical needs of the United States of America could be generated from one 10,000 square mile solar array. That's a big, giant solar array, but that gives you the idea that we could set a place aside in the Arizona desert, call it Power Land or something, and just put out wind turbines and solar panels everywhere you look for 10,000 miles, and that would produce enough energy to literally power our entire country with electricity, and that would include probably driving electric cars. which is something we need to do. Quit burning fossil fuels to get transportation. Biodiesel you could use, because when you think about biodiesel, there's a difference. People say, oh, it's a dirty fuel or this or that, but it really isn't, because you're using carbon from above the skin of the apple to create it. Does that make sense? You're using biological material that's on the surface to create this fuel that you're burning. So the fuel can't be dirty because it's balanced. If we were to be able to grow some crop, because you can make plastics, you can do everything you need to do without consuming crude oil. Leave those dead dinosaurs in the ground. Bringing them out has done nothing but wreak havoc, and will continue to do so. And checking the time here, I can't see very well. 3 minutes or so. So we do have the power to stop this. We do. It's just a matter of will, folks. And I know I'm going to be moving to Eugene, Oregon here in a few months. And I'm going to activate people. I'm going to get out on the street and I'm going to activate people. And, let's try to figure out a project. One roof per house, one tile per house, or one cell per house, something like that, So, one solar cell per roof. We could just do that. A program where any homeowner could just pitch in like $50, and boom, there you got a solar cell that feeds into an inverter, which kind of gives you a little extra boost of energy during the day. No batteries. So during the day, if you've got, let's say, one 250 watt panel on the roof, or 300 watt panel on the roof, and that's 5 hours, you're going to get 1.5 kilowatt hours of usable 110 volt electricity out of that. Perhaps. Let's make it 1 kilowatt hour, but 1 kilowatt hour is enough. That means you could plug in an appliance that uses 1,000 watts for an hour. Think electric heater. That's enough energy to run a washing machine. That's enough energy to run your lighting if you did hook it to a battery for the night. This is the way we need to start thinking. So, my name is Jerome. I am the Sane Environmentalist. You can catch me on YouTube. I am the Sane Environmentalist on YouTube. I have PayPal as well there. If you feel like pitching in and helping me out, I sure do appreciate any help I get, as well as people who subscribe to my YouTube channel. So it's 8:58, I think. I can't really read these little numbers very well. Okay, so it's 8:58. The extra music should be kicking in any second now. And when it does, then I'll quit talking. So this is the part of my, when I do the show, it's called Wing It. Thank you. Have a good day.
My name is S.